Hey, what is up guys? I'm here to review a couple of my dive watches. The first one is my Omega Seamaster Professional 300 meter dive watch that I recently acquired. And then my second is my TAG Heuer Aquaracer, which is my first Swiss luxury watch. Both solid pieces, both have their value proposition. I thought it'd be interesting to walk through the pros and cons of each, walk through some of the specs, functionality, and then the styling, and then also give you some of my general thoughts on the watches. On the left here, you see the Omega Seamaster Professional 300 meter dive watch. I recently acquired this to my collection, and it's an awesome watch. I've had so much fun with this so far in the few weeks that I've owned it. And then on the right here, you'll see the TAG Heuer Aquaracer Caliber 5. This is my first luxury Swiss dive watch, and I've owned this guy for about half a year, and I've definitely enjoyed my time with this guy as well. The big difference between these two right off the bat is the price, right? Omega is, a very big brand. TAG is a big brand as well, but this guy retails at about half the price of the Omega. So I just wanted to walk through the specs, functionally, what you get with each watch, and then also, from a technical perspective, and then also stylistically, what's different. What are you really getting for double the price? Is it worth it? What do these two watches kind of bring to the table? So I thought it'd be interesting to do a comparison of these two guys. I'll go through and just walk through the specs. So with the TAG, dimensionally, it's 43 millimeters in diameter. Lug to lug, this guy is 20 millimeters. Starting here at the case, and then it tapers down to 18 millimeters. There's a taper here. The height of the case, or the thickness, is about 12.7 millimeters thick, so it sits very nice and thin on your wrist. And then the lug tip to lug tip is about 50 millimeters. So this example, this version is the 43 millimeter. It also comes in, I believe, a 41 millimeter model as well. I found that this size to be a little large for my liking over time. I think I was pretty ambitious when I went and bought my first luxury Swiss dive watch, and I was like, oh, the bigger the better. It's only a couple $100 more. I think the 41 millimeter was $1,600. This was $1,800. I purchased this guy off of a Joma shop, and but over time I've realized that this watch is just a little too big for my tastes. And I'll show you why. So it sits nice on the wrist. It's very nice and thin. Lug tip to lug tip. Obviously it's got a bigger wingspan. Lug to lug. It's definitely a bulky watch right off the bat, but it does sit very thin on my wrist. The issue that I have with this large size is, first of all, it's there's no micro adjust on this clasp. So it does slide off your wrist quite easily. It's kind of hard to get the perfect fit. And because of that, I feel that the 43 millimeter, compared to the 41, can be a tad bit heavy. So that causes it to sort of slide down your wrist a little bit easier than if you had the 41 millimeter example. But that's just from my personal sort of experience. You get a dive, 120 click unidirectional dive bezel here. And let me just show you the action. Very smooth, very easy to turn. The clicks are nice and solid. No back play in between positions. Oh. And very easy to turn overall. As you can see, you can almost kind of make out some of the lume here. The lume on this watch is really solid. It is a bicolor application. You get the blue and the green. So the bezel pip here, and then some of the minute hands as well as the tip of the second hand are in green, whereas the minute markers, you get those in blue. You get a signed crown here, the TAG Heuer logo here, polished case sides, and then brushed bracelet and brushed clasp. The sides of the end links are polished as well. And then you get 3 micro adjusts. As I mentioned, there's no push slider, and then this is a screw down crown, 300 meters of water resistance, which is 1,000 feet. The back of the case, you see you get this little diver guy that it's kind of like a stamped logo. Get the TAG Heuer logo on there as well. And it's a screw down case back, which is nice. push pins on the end links, so it is very difficult to size this watch. It's very hard to take out this end links. I tried when I first got this watch, and I had my standard tools with the, the little hammer and the little tool that you could use to pop out the end links, and I tried multiple times. I was hammering at it. I probably knocked it too hard. I ended up scratching some of the end links, and I had to take it into my TAG Heuer boutique in my area for them to get it fixed, and they actually ended up having to replace a couple of the end links because I kind of dinged them up so bad trying to change them. So these are definitely very secure, but they're just very, very hard to change on your own. So that's definitely a knock on that push pin design. So that's the tag. Let me just walk through the dimensions of the Omega. So the Omega has the 42 millimeter diameter. It's 20 millimeters lug to lug, and there's no taper here, so it's 20 millimeters all the way down. The height of the case is a little thicker than the tag. It's about 13.7. And a part of that is due to this extra scallop display case back that you see in the back. It adds a little bit of thickness, but on wrist it does sit very well. It sits very flat on the wrist and just feels like a much less chunky watch than the tag. You get this, as you can see, it's a huge clasp in the back. It's brushed. And then you get the sort of brushed and a little bit of polishing on the bracelet here. The sides of the bracelet are brushed. The sides of the case are brushed. And then there's some polishing on this sort of twisted lug design here. And then just a cool combination of brushed and polished finishing. I actually prefer this over the tag because the tag has a lot more polishing, so I feel that scratches a lot easier and it doesn't hold up as well in the long term, but that's just my take on it. And the brush finishing has a nice, very kind of bold and masculine feel about it as well. As you can see, there is a screw down crown with the Omega logo. This guy is also water resistant at 300 meters. And then there's a helium escape valve at the 10 o'clock, which is sort of become Omega's design ethos for the Seamaster. When you see a watch that has the helium escape valve, you immediately associate with an Omega Seamaster. So it's been controversial, but I personally think that it's sort of become their brand. So as you can see, it's a very solid clasp with the milled clasp here. You do get this micro adjust, which is really nice. You push this down to adjust the different positions and sizing of the bracelet. And then you get a dive extension on this as well. I forgot to mention that the tag has one, but it's pressed metal. It's not, the quality of it isn't as high as on the Omega. Pressed metal clasp. And then on the Omega, the diver extension that you get is very solid. It's this milled diver's extension. And however much you get to use that on a day-to-day basis, it's very limited. Some people have said that they like to put it over their jacket sleeves. They can have that extra give. It's designed to fit around a wetsuit, but as far as day-to-day use, you don't really use it. You will use, however, this push extension, which is very, very useful when your wrist swells up in the summer, and when it contracts in the winter. It's just very good to have that perfect size. There's a display case back, and this is showcasing Omega's master chronometer coaxial 8800 movement. And this is a significantly more advanced movement than what's in the tag. I forgot to mention the tag has a 2824 based movement. It's slightly modified in a couple of positions, but this guy is really kind of the kicker of this watch. It's very high tech. It's anti-magnetic up to 15,000 Gauss, and it's extremely accurate. It's got this silicon hairspring that you can see spinning there. An amazing piece of technology from Omega, and it's extremely accurate as well. This guy, so it's Maytest certified, meaning it's more stringent than the standard COSC chronometer certification. It's tested in multiple positions, at different varying temperatures. I've had amazing accuracy on this watch. In the time that I've used it, in the past 2 weeks, it's only gained about 7 seconds, so it's gaining about half a second a day. Just amazing accuracy. So those are the specs and dimensions of the watch. I don't think I missed anything major. I've reviewed both of these watches individually, so if I missed anything, you can go and check out those videos. Let's go into the style of each of these watches. So on the Aquaracer, you see it kind of has like this plank styling, these horizontal lines. I think they're meant to be styled after a ship plank. On the Omega, you see it's got these very nice laser engraved wave dials, and it's a ceramic dial, so that's very nice. Very, very good styling cues on both. I would say the tag is a little bit more subdued, and then the Omega has a bit more of a pop to it, and that's kind of harkening back to the Bond era. Another thing I wanted to mention is this guy has the Maxi applied indices. They're the round circular indices. You'll see they're very legible. The contrast between the black and white is very legible. The outside, the bezel, these are actually enamel filled, so they're extremely legible, very durable long term. On the tag, they also have these very bold indices, and then instead of the skeletonized hands that you see on the Omega, which is very unique to this particular watch, you get these kind of sword-like hands. And then the bezel here is, I believe these are filled with steel, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot more texture to the bezel around here versus the enamel on the Omega, which is a lot more smooth. So let's go through the pros and cons. I think I walked through the specs pretty thoroughly. In terms of the pros of the Omega, the biggest thing is the accuracy, the movement that's inside this watch, the technology. It's very amazing. And the 8800 master coaxial movement that they use in this watch. Another pro of the Omega is the name provenance, right? Omega is considered a very heavy hitter and is a huge contender of Rolex. Not that Tag isn't, but Omega definitely has a bit more of that name provenance. In my opinion, the Omega wears a little bit better on the wrist. It's very easy to get the perfect fit, and it also doesn't slide down my wrist like the Tag does. Another benefit of the Omega is that it has the AR coating on both sides of the sapphire crystal. It's extremely legible. In certain angles, it almost looks like there's no crystal at all. Makes the watch a lot more legible in different lighting conditions. Last but not least, I think one of the pros of the Omega is the presentation box that you get as well. You get this very solid lacquer box with very pleasant finishing on the inside, and just looks very gorgeous. The tag box is just very standard. It's nothing to write home about. It's nothing too eye-catching. So let's go through the pros of the Tag. Obviously the price, it's about half the price of the Omega. You're still getting a very great brand with the Tag. Tag Heuer, it's a name steeped in history. You've made a lot of very memorable models, such as the Monaco and the Carrera. They're just very well known in the watch industry as well, and you get that name provenance. I would say that the bracelet is a little sportier than the Omega. The Oyster style just looks a little bit more rugged, a little bit more, just overall sporty compared to the Omega. In my opinion, this watch also has better legibility in the dark. The lume on this watch, the lume is excellent on both watches, but on this watch, because it doesn't have the skeletonized hands, it's a little bit more legible. The last pro that I would say is the action on the bezel. It is a little easier to turn versus the Omega, and it's a very solid bezel. So let's walk through some of the cons. The cons for me for the Omega is that the bracelet, besides not being as sporty as the Tag, I do find the bracelet is a little dressier, however, but it is very sharp. The edges on here are not as rounded and not as comfortable on wrist. So sometimes when you're wearing the watch, you do find that it kind of digs into your wrist a little bit more, and it's slightly less comfortable than if you're wearing the Tag. And then another con is what I mentioned earlier, it's the legibility isn't as easy to read in the dark versus the tag. And then lastly, the bezel actually is very solid on this watch, but it's just ever so slightly harder to turn versus the tag. And the cons of this tag, kind of the large size, and you can get this watch in the 41 millimeter, but I found that the 43 is definitely too big. I think 42 is probably my cutoff. The Omega isn't a small watch by any means as well, so the 43 really just kind of takes it up a little too far. There's no display case back. I love seeing the movement in my watches. It's just kind of my thing. And then lastly, there is no micro or push adjust on the bracelet. So given the larger size of this watch, it's even easier for it to slide down your wrist because it doesn't have that micro adjust. You don't get that perfect sizing. So let me just give you some final thoughts on these two watches. I think they're both very solid value proposition. What you get in the tag for the price range, it's extremely solid. I think it compares more favorably than some of his competitors, such as the Oris. And there's a huge cult following for the Oris. I think in terms of name provenance, you get a little bit more with the Tag Heuer. There's no denying that the Tag brand is highly more recognized. For me, it is a factor because I'm spending thousands of dollars on these watches. For me personally, I like to have a little bit of a recognition factor. In terms of the Omega, it is twice the price, but in terms of what you get, the technology, the added name provenance, the fit and the finish, I do feel that this is a watch that's worth double the price, absolutely, if not even more. If you size this watch up against a Rolex Submariner, a lot of people have agreed that this watch compares favorably to the Sub, which is a watch that's twice the price of this guy. So in terms of what you get at this price point, I would say that this is absolutely a steal. So when it comes down to it, it's just a matter of what you want to go with. You know, the Tag is half the price. You get a very solid watch at half the price. The Omega is, twice the price. But, someone would argue that it's worth more. But it is twice the price. So it depends on whether you want to make a higher investment up front and have a watch that spec for spec is more compelling than the Tag, or for whatever reason, for financial reasons or, movement and technology and all that isn't as big of a deal for you, the Tag Heuer is definitely a very solid option at the price point. Stylistically, it's subjective. I would say that the Tag actually has a more universal sporty appeal to it. It really just depends on what you're looking for. The Omega has kind of a quirkier design, so it's really up to personal preference. But I've really enjoyed my time with both of these watches. So let me know what you guys thought of the video. I've been wanting to do this comparison for a long time, and I think it's a very sought after comparison. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.